Hi guys, this is Sanjay. Today we are going to study about file operations in C. So before we start, let's try to understand why are these file operations required. Any application, there may be a requirement of storing some data into a file or reading the data from the file. If you take an example of MP3, you may have to read the data and put it in an audio codec and play it. So that's what it is. So any application, take it as an Windows application or an embedded application, you may require file operations. So to do these file operations, what function calls are used in the operating system and how do we do it is what we are going to study today. So before we start, let's try to understand what are the major file operations we do generally in our daily life. So generally we create a file with a specific name and an extension. So now I'm creating test.txt in a specific path and we open a file, write something to it. So once we write something to it, we save the file and we close it. So if you broadly see it, we create a file, we open a file, we read and write into a file, and then we close a file. So how do we do this programmatically in the backend is what we are going to see today. So let's get started. So the major file operation functions in C are fopen, fclose, fwrite and fread. So we'll use these functions to do the file operation. So for that, let me create an .c file. I'll say gedit main.c, give it any name. So I've created a main.c. So these functions are present in our normal header file, that is stdio.h. So there is no extra header file that you need to include for this file operations. So I'll say hash include stdio.h. so this is what we need. So let me create an main function. So unstandard main function is what I am going to create. Then to start with, let's start using how do we create or open a file. To do this, we have a function called fopen. It takes two parameters. The main parameter is the path where you have to create or open a file, then the mode in which you have to open it. So both of them are string parameters, so I am putting it in a string format. So let me fill the path where I need to create a file. So to know a path, what I can do is I can create in any path in your file system. So I'll go to desktop, tutorial, file operation. I'll create a file over here. So let me copy this path from here and go to my program and paste it. So this is the path where I want to create a file and I need to give it a name. So name, I'll say my file.txt. So this is what is the name that I have given for my file, and probably I have to give an extension also for it. So you can give any extension. For now I have given txt. So the next thing is the second parameter. The second parameter is the mode in which you have to open a file. The mode in which you have to open a file, we have different modes in which we can open. R is to say only read. R plus is to say read and write. W is to say write, but if the file is not existing, you can create a file, and if the file is existing, it will remove all the content and it will make the file as a new file. W plus is read write with creation of a new file. Append and append plus. So we'll come across this later. So if at all, if you want to go for more detail on this modes, what you can do is you can just say man and fopen. So you can see all the file modes and its operations over here. To know more about this. So it is as simple as write, read, in which mode that you have to open. So let me say I want to open it in W plus. W plus is to say that if the file is not existing, I need to create a new file. So these are the two parameters which I have given. The next thing is this fopen returns me an file pointer. So very important, it returns me a file pointer. It's an structure of file pointer which is already been given to us. So we'll have to define an file pointer with this name and I'll initialize it to null for the sake. I'll initialize it to null. So let me just take this file pointer and assign it to an fopen. So whenever there is a new file opened, it returns me a file pointer, and we can use this file pointer for any further operations. Any further operations can be read and write for now. So let me open it. So I'll not do any further operations. I'll just close a file. So with this, I can just see whether my file is opened, and if my file is opened, it returns an valid file pointer. So I need to check in my program if my fp is equal to null, that is to say that my file is not created. So there is something wrong with my file operation, else my file is created. So I will just close the file. So I'm not doing any read and write for now. So let's do it once we create a file and once we understand file fopen and fclose. So for now, I'll say printf error in creating the file, and probably the next printf is the else part, where we have a valid pointer, then created file successfully. So this is what I'm going to say. So once I created a file successfully, I'll just close it. So fclose is a function which takes a parameter, that is to say which file you have to close. The only once it is opened you can close a file. So the one which I opened just now is in this file pointer, and the same file pointer I'm going to close this. So with this operation, we can see whether our file is created. If the file is created, it gives me this string and it can close a specific file. So now let's compile this program and see if we will be able to create a file from the program. So let me go to terminal and go to the place where I have stored this main.c, desktop tutorial file operations. So if you see this, I have my main.c. So let me compile this using gcc command, and I'll output it as test. So once I do this, I've compiled the program without errors. So if you see this, there's one executable test which got created. So to run this executable, I'll say /test and I press enter. So if you see this, it executed my program and it printed file created successfully. So how do we know if the file got created? I just say ls, that is list all my files, and you can see there is an file named myfile.txt. This is what I have given in my program, myfile.txt. So fopen with two parameters. One is the path where you have to create a file along with the file name and the extension, and then the mode in which you have to create or open a file, and this returns a file pointer. This file pointer has to be checked for its validity, whether if it is null or not null. If it is not null, then it is to say that it has a valid pointer. Then you do a specific operation. So now we were just closing the file, but let's start with write something to a file. So to write something to a file, we have a function called fwrite. So this fwrite take a couple of parameters. First we'll understand what all these parameters are. So fwrite takes and pointer where your data is stored. The pointer where the data is stored, that has to be written into the file. The second one is the size of the data that has to be written. The third one is the number of items or the number of times the same data has to be written. For now, we can keep this as 1. Then the file pointer which you have opened to do this file operation. So we have the pointer to the data, the size of the data, and the number of items that has to be written, that is 1 for now, and then the file pointer. So let's start doing that. So I'll send I'll create one variable, probably char my data, and I'll initialize it to write this to my file. I'll just keep this as my variable. So this is my data that has to be written, and I'm sending the address of it. So the address of the array itself, the name of the array itself is the address of the array. So I keep the name. Then I say size of the data to be written. I'll say size of, and I'll say my data. So I'll say this is what the size that I have to write into a file. Then the number of times that I have to write is 1. Then the file pointer, to which file you have to write. The one which I got opened, or the one which I recently opened, that's the one which I have to write. So I'll use the same file pointer as the place or the file that has to be written. So now let's compile this program and see we'll be able to write this data into the file which we opened. So I'll save this file, go back to my terminal, clear, and I'll recompile this code. So once I recompile this code, I'll execute this code again. So we have nothing to be printed on my screen. All I have to do is go back to that specific place and verify by opening that specific file. So I'll open my file and see that we are able to write the data to the file, but we are able to see /0 also at the end, which is treated as in junk. So to avoid this, probably what we have to do is the size of string is giving the complete string length plus /0. So I'll just do an -1 so that I don't want to write that /0 into my file. So once I do this, probably we'll do a quick compile and run just to see if it is corrected, and I'll reload this file. So now if you see, only the string has been written into my file. So this is how we can write something into my file. So I use the pointer to the data which we have to write, the size of the data to be written, the number of items, that is 1 for now, and the file pointer. So let's try to write number of lines, so a couple of more lines into the same file. So I'll just copy a few more buffers. I'll just create 2 more buffers, like my data 1, my data 2. So my data 2. Then I'll say some other content over here. So line 1 written and line 2 written. So once this is done, so probably to get into the next line, we can use the same /n so that in the file also these /n's are considered for the new line. So I'll save this. Now I have to write this data into my file. So I'll call this fwrite couple of more times before I close it, and I use my new buffer, my data 1, and size of my data 1, and I'll use the second data, my data 2, and size of my data 2. So once I do this, I'm writing these 3 buffers into this file. So let's go compile this program and run this. And to verify, let me open this file again. So if you see this, we are able to write 3 lines of code, and which is in different lines. That's because we have given /n, and yeah, of course there is line 2 which is in typo, which has been corrected. So this is how we will be able to write multiple buffers into a specific file. Remember, once you write this specific data, you have to close the file. So only closing will flush the data into the hard disk, and it will actually permanently write the file. So if you miss close, sometimes the data may be corrupted and sometimes it may not be written completely. So make sure you call close once you are done with your file operations. And also make sure you actually write once you have opened it. So it's in sequence: fopen, write or read, and then close. So we have written it. So now let's try to read something from the file. So to read something from the file, we have fread, and this fread has the same parameters. So now you're reading from the file. So from the file you have to store it into some buffer. So let me take an empty buffer. So read data, I'll give some size, some 30, just some random number. So this is the place where I have to read the data from the file and store it. So let's go back to our prototype of this. So pointer to the place where the data has to be read, the size of the data to be read, the number of items is 1 for now, and then the file pointer. So it's as same as your f, right? So this pointer where the data has to be read. So now I am reading from the file and storing it in this specific data which I just now created. Then probably I'll read some given 20 bytes which I'll read it, and then I'll say number of items as 1 and the file pointer as the same file pointer which I used to read. So now if at all if you see this, now I am reading it, but the file pointer is now pointing to the end of the file. If you see this, it writes this, it writes this, and it writes this, and now the FP is pointing to end. So now if you try to read from this place 20 bytes, you read nothing. So to move back your file pointer from your file pointer from the end to the start, what you can do is you can just open a file again with read mode. So I'll just copy this and I'll just say read mode so that I don't recreate or truncate it or flush the file. I just open it with read mode and I use the same file pointer. Then I call this read. Then probably I'll close the files. I'll close this specific file. So what has been read is something that I have to print. So I'll just use printf to print my data. So I am using, I'll just say %s data read from the file is %s, and I'll give the specific buffer. So why I closed and opened a file is because I want to move my file pointer to the start of my file. That's whenever you open a new file, it will move that file pointer to the start. And if I have used this fread over here, it would not read the data properly because it's already pointing to the end of the file, and from there it tries to read 20 bytes. So I don't want that. I want 20 bytes to be read from my starting point. So that's where I close the file and I reopen that file in read mode so that the file pointer moves to the starting position, and from my starting position I am reading 20 bytes and I am printing it. So I'll just save this and recompile my program and run it. So there are some /n's or the prints are not good, so I'll just put /n's at the end of my prints, so that will help me understand my logs better. So I'll just compile this again and run this. So the data read from the file is, so this is what it is read. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you count this, this is close to 20 bytes which is read. So if you want to increase the size, so you can increase it probably to the maximum size I have given is 30. So I'll put it as 29 so that or 30. I'll just read all the 30 bytes. I just saved and I'll compile this again and I'll execute this. So if you see this, it has read 30 bytes from my file and it is printing it over here. So the whole summary is, to open or create a file, you just need to do fopen with the file path and the mode at which you have to open. Write, you have to use the buffer, the size of the buffer and the file pointer, so you can do multiple writes before you close. Then to read, you reopen the file with read mode. Don't open with the write plus, because it will overwrite whatever you have written. It will just clear it and give a new file for you. So open with read mode, and also your file pointer moves to the starting position once you reopen the file, and from there you can read the data from the file to any of the buffer. And I'm reading 30 bytes from the file, and I'm just printing it, and I'm closing the file. So this gives you a basic idea of how do we create a file, open a file for reading and writing operations. Thanks guys, thanks for watching.